Picture a wicking bed at the peak of July. You walk out to check the garden, and you look at the overflow pipe. The reservoir below is completely full. The bed is holding 10, maybe 15 gallons of trapped rainwater. But when you reach out and touch the topsoil, it feels like dry dust. The leaves on your plants are beginning to droop. The tomato stems look stressed. The plant is wilting, even though it is sitting right above a massive, hidden pool of water. This is the exact moment many gardeners realize they did not actually build a wicking bed. They just built a wooden box with a bucket trapped underneath it. The whole point of a wicking system is independence. You fill the bottom chamber, and the bed waters itself from below, drawing moisture up exactly as the roots need it. But the symptom always seems to show up the same way. You find yourself standing there in the afternoon sun, holding a hose, top watering a bed that was specifically designed to never need a hose. You start to think the climate is simply too hot this year, or maybe the plants are just incredibly thirsty. But the problem is not the heat. The problem is a broken bridge. Storing water under a garden is completely useless if the soil does not have a physical pathway to pull that moisture upward. This is the hidden mistake buried inside thousands of backyard wicking beds. The gardener focuses heavily on the plumbing. They spend hours getting the waterproof liner perfectly folded, installing the drainage pipe, and leveling the gravel. But they leave out the actual wick. Water defies gravity through capillary action. It is a slow, silent, mechanical process. Water climbs by gripping the edges of tiny, microscopic air spaces in the soil, pulling itself up from one particle to the next. It relies entirely on continuous surface tension. But water cannot jump an empty gap, and it cannot climb the smooth sides of large, loose river rock if there is nothing packed tightly between those rocks. This is where the first structural failure usually happens. Many tutorials suggest putting a thick layer of gravel or expanded clay at the very bottom of the bed, covering that layer with heavy landscape fabric, and then dumping standard potting soil directly on top. If the soil sits strictly above the fabric, and the water sits strictly in the empty spaces between the gravel below, the capillary chain is broken. The water hits the fabric roof and stops. The roots hit the dry soil floor and stop. They are separated by a millimeter of woven plastic, but they might as well be miles apart. The water cannot reach the soil, and the soil cannot draw the water. It sounds almost impossible to have a flooded container and a drought-stressed plant at the exact same time, but it happens in backyards every single summer. The instinct, of course, is to just flood the top. You see the dusty surface, you see the wilting leaves, and you grab the watering can to rescue the plants. But now, you are pushing heavy water down into a system that is already holding standing water at the bottom. The overflow pipe kicks in, you waste the water you just poured, and worse, you begin to slowly compact the soil structure over time. You are squeezing out the oxygen the roots desperately need. You end up with a bed that is suffocating at the bottom and parched at the top. Even if you avoid the landscape fabric trap, there is a second silent failure that causes wicking beds to dry out. It is a failure of depth. Water is heavy, and gravity is relentless. Even with a perfect connection and excellent soil, water will only climb so high. Depending on the exact texture of your soil mix, moisture might only naturally rise 12 to 15 inches against gravity. If you build a raised wicking bed that is 3 feet deep, and you fill it completely with topsoil, the system will never function the way you expect. The bottom foot of that soil might be soaked. The middle foot might be slightly damp. But the top foot, the exact zone where your young seedlings are desperately trying to survive their first 3 weeks in the sun, will remain permanently, stubbornly dry. The water simply runs out of lifting power before it reaches the surface. The bed looks massive and deep, but the wicking engine inside it is stalling out halfway up. To make a wicking bed function, the fix is not to water more from the top. The fix is to rebuild the moisture pathway. If you are starting fresh, or rebuilding an empty bed for the new season, the connection between the water and the growing zone must be deliberate. You need to create a dedicated wicking column. This is a specific section of the bed where the growing medium drops directly down into the water reservoir. No fabric blocking the way. No empty air gaps. Often, this means cutting a wide slit or a circle right through the landscape fabric separator. You then allow a column of highly capillary material to reach all the way to the floor of the water basin. The material you use for this bridge matters immensely. Standard garden dirt is often too heavy and will just turn into thick, anaerobic mud when submerged. Large wood chips or chunky bark have too much empty airspace between them, and they will fail to lift the water. You need a dense, sponge-like matrix. A mix of coconut coir, peat moss, or very fine compost blended with vermiculite or coarse sand is ideal. These materials have millions of microscopic pores that act like tiny straws, pulling moisture upward with incredible efficiency. You pack this wicking mix into the column, ensuring it makes solid physical contact with the main soil body above. When the reservoir fills, This column acts as the engine, drawing water up and dispersing it slowly into the surrounding bed. But what if your bed is already planted? What if it is the middle of June, your tomatoes are 3 feet tall, the topsoil is dry, and you realize your wicking bridge is broken? You cannot simply empty the bed and start over. There is a way to test and rescue a failing system without destroying the garden. First, verify the problem. Dig a narrow, careful test hole down one corner or side of the raised bed until you hit the barrier separating the soil from the reservoir. If that barrier is bone dry on top, but the reservoir below is full of water, your bridge is officially broken. To fix it, you can create an artificial wicking column from above. Take a piece of wide PVC pipe, perhaps 3 or 4 inches in diameter. Drill several holes down the sides of it. Carefully dig down through the soil and cut a small hole through the landscape fabric. Push the pipe down so it rests inside the water reservoir, while the top sits flush with the soil surface. Now tightly pack the inside of that pipe with pure coconut coir or a heavy peat mix. Pack it down so it reaches the water, and mound a little bit of the coir over the top edge so it touches the surrounding garden soil. You have just retrofitted a capillary bridge. It may not be as efficient as a fully designed wicking floor, but that vertical column of coir will immediately begin drawing moisture out of the standing water and spreading it into the dry upper layers. You must also respect the depth limit. If your bed is deeper than 16 inches, you cannot rely entirely on wicking to start your seeds. You will need to lightly top water the surface for the first few weeks until the roots grow deep enough to reach the moisture line rising from below. When the connection is finally built right, the entire behavior of the bed changes. The difference is something you can feel in your hands. Before, you were constantly guessing. You were swinging wildly between dry dust on Tuesday and heavy mud on Thursday. You were top watering a system that was slowly drowning at its base. After you fix the bridge, the soil simply stabilizes. It stays evenly, predictably damp. It pulls exactly what it needs, exactly when the weather and the roots demand it. The surface of the bed might still dry out slightly in the afternoon sun, which is actually excellent for preventing fungal diseases and stopping shallow weed seeds from germinating. But just an inch below that dry surface, the moisture is steady, cool, and waiting. It changes how you look at the entire system. A raised wicking bed is not just a wooden box holding a hidden puddle of water. It is a continuous, unbroken chain of physical tension. It is a silent mechanism linking a single drop of water resting at the very bottom of the gravel, directly to the very edge of a green leaf stretching into the sun. The reservoir is only useful if the roots can reach the pathway. When you stop worrying about the plumbing and start focusing on the bridge, the water will finally find its way home.